Hi, Cynthia.
Hey, Jen.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad we start all our episodes with like this giggly energy. It's so great.
It is. It's fun. It's fun to be happy.
It is. It is. I completely agree.
Awesome. So, what are we talking about today?
Taking time off as a solopreneur.
Oh, that's really timely. I think we both wanted to use this podcast to really inspire people, A, to take time off, right? And B, to do all the things to prepare for taking time off.
Yes, and it's very intentional, I guess that's the point of it. Yeah. Yeah, so I think I told this in another episode, I can't remember which one, but I'll quickly elaborate that when I was starting my business, I was listening to all different types of podcasts actually, and, I was listening to, I guess, someone I wanna say like a bigger names, kind of podcast, and she was interviewing a woman who had had six-figure launch, was, like, very successful, and she was telling the story of her launch, and then she gets to this point where she says, "And then I was transferred to a hospital because I basically like passed out and I couldn't, I don't know. I was just unconscious, like something horrible happened and she had to go into ER. And then she just kept telling about her launch and I immediately turned off that episode and I was so angry at the time. I think in my other episode where we talked about it, I was like more angry. I'm much more serene about it now. But I was so angry at the time because it just first of all, I was angry that they didn't talk about that. Like it was just kind of, oh yeah, that's normal. Like just if she had told me like I was ran over by a bus and then it just bothered me that we were just talking about the success of her launch when this person obviously had some big health stuff happening. And what I was conflicted by, and I feel like as women, it's not just about health, it's this thing of like we always have to choose, right? It's like this or of like choose your health or be successful in business, choose your kids or be successful in business. And I think it's just so BS. And so this is just I'm passionate about this topic because it's something, it's one of the reasons I started my business coming out of corporate and being very much into like a workaholic sort of vibe and just having to learn like what does it look like to not be hospitalized? Like what is the other
Right.
choice,
It's almost like it was being glorified
Exactly.
from from hearing what you're
Yeah.
saying. I left corporate America, same as you, working 50-hour weeks, waking up when my kids were still asleep, my 4 kids, and coming home at night after they were already in bed. And I left corporate America because I wanted to spend more time with my kids. And then the beginning of my business, 2009, when I'm like just starting the whole thing, I I kept that type of mentality.
Right.
Um, and where I was like, "Ah, I have so much work," or "I'm so busy,"
Right.
or, my husband wants to like watch a movie with me and I'm like, "Ugh, I can't. I've got too much work," or something, right? It is it can become a habit very easily.
Yeah.
You will burn out and your business will fail. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but I mean, you will burn
Yeah.
out and you'll like stop wanting to do what you started, what you loved
Right.
in the beginning. And I feel like it's not easy balancing the world, balancing work-life balance. That is like a misnomer. It's
Mhm.
not even accurate,
Right.
right? I feel like the only thing that fixes that is commitment and consistency with making sure that you're doing all the things that you need to do for your client work and everything, but in a way that you're not overwhelmed with,
Mhm.
right? So maybe you need to hire a contractor to help out a couple hours a week. Maybe you need to block your calendar off so you do not have work. Maybe, like in my case, over the last 3 weeks, I had back to back meetings every day of my week except the Tuesdays I take off, and I was overwhelmed. I wasn't overwhelmed with my job. I was overwhelmed because I was throwing so much crap onto my calendar, which was great, great meetings. I don't want to diss the people I was meeting with, but you can do that at a better pace, right? So I've blocked a couple days that I have 0 meetings, so I always know I have time to do work now. Um, and and having a like, it's non-negotiable,
Yes,
right?
non-negotiable.
We feel like that with client work, but we almost never do that for our home life,
Mhm.
and I'm over it.
Yeah.
So, we wanted to make sure that you guys are prepared with some things like that the tip that I just gave you in terms of your calendar. We just wanna talk through a little bit of the things that we do in our personal life to make and professional life to make sure that we're present with our family, which is the
Yes.
most important thing to both of us. And it's kind of timely as we're coming upon the holidays.
Yes, yes. And the last thing I wanna comment on before we dive into our strategies and our things and all that, is that I've also embraced instead of this balance sort of idea, this phases and cycles. So I might go through a cycle, like you said, back-to-back meetings, I've got a lot going on and it feels great. And I'm like, and I'm, maybe that week I'm not spending as much time with my family, but then I know I can go back. So it's like this idea of it's not go, go, go. And then you're like all dry, dry, no gas on anything. So I think that's also the beauty of having your own business is like you can lean into these phases because I think also I guess the story was that like well how long was she working like that for to get to the point where she had to be hospitalized. Because I agree like during a launch you are more into I've seen you Jen launch and you are a machine like Jen like I've seen her do the summits and stuff like that and it's incredible and I know she has a team too, right? So I completely agree. Getting help eventually, whenever you can, as soon as you can, it's
Yeah,
going to change
yeah,
everything for you. But I just feel like I love this. Like, if I have a week where I'm sick or several weeks, I can take care of myself. If my daughter's sick, I can take care of her. Like, I can find that flexibility and I can trust that my business will keep going. And there might be years where like things are a little slower or months or whatever. And I can embrace that instead of, I don't know, always prioritizing an antique way of working where it's like, well, I always have to be working, 8 hours or whatever the number is, right? So I think that that's the
yeah,
key.
instead of a balance, right, work-life
Mhm,
balance, which it is kind of the connotation
mhm,
of, like, easing on,
mhm.
easing off kinda situation. I like to think of it I have guardrails. Like,
Oh,
if my husband says,
yeah.
"Do you wanna watch a movie with me?" And my gut instinct is to be like, "I don't have time." That's a guardrail.
Right.
That's a reminder, and we'll be totally honest with
Mhm.
you. We loved the idea of doing this podcast, and we're enjoying it thoroughly. I love spending time with Cynthia. However, we just took some of our recording time that we had guarded, and we used it as work time.
Yeah.
Because to get this done with all of our other business and our family life is a little hard.
Yeah.
Now it's just because 'cause we're launching,
Yes.
so we're not gonna be we've identified a way to record sort of once a month and be able to get those videos out each week without feeling that craziness.
Mhm.
But because we're just starting it, it's gonna be a little crazy. So don't panic if you're in a launch phase or you're doing something and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is me." Acknowledgement is the first step.
And we just renegotiated some dates, Jen, too, because Jen
We did. We were gonna launch earlier.
yeah.
Let's just be honest. I wanted to launch immediately,
I
you
just
know?
reminded Jen that, like, you don't need to burn out, basically. I think that's you don't need to burn out. You can push things out, you can spread it out, you can make it shorter, you can make it longer, you can hire things out. Like, I've had a coach was like, "Well, could you just hire more stuff out and, like, just consciously decide to spend more money?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, I never thought of that." Like, spend more
And sometimes
money.
and sometimes the answer is
Right,
no,
sometimes the answer is no, but
right?
choosing, right? Like, instead of
Yeah.
being this idea of like, "Well, I have to stay up every day until 2 AM," like, really? Like, is it have to be like that? Could it be maybe, okay, maybe you
1 day a
pull
week
yeah,
or
exactly, like, there's options. I feel like there's always options, and again, we're living this, like, we both have families, we have, like, 4 kids. Wow, Jen, like, I'm always like, wow, I know there's
well,
older, but
4 adult children now and 4 grandchildren, so it's just switched that priority
right,
a little bit.
right, right, but we both got stuff going on, and it's beautiful, and, like, I wouldn't do it any other way, you know? I think that's the other flip side. I think there's a lot of people maybe listening who are like, "Well, how do I get out of my family stuff and, like, start my own thing?" And it's like, well, they don't have to live on opposite sides. They could be very integrated, and it just takes some playing around with. But yeah, let's talk about the taking time off.
Well, and that will lead me to my first tip,
Mhm.
which is get your calendar in order.
Mm. Yes.
Like, you should not have a personal well, you can have a personal calendar and a business calendar, but they need to merge
Yes.
because you need to know that you can't schedule a meeting because 'cause you're going to the
Right.
dentist or, you have a play date or whatever,
Right.
right? So, there's a way in Google in the Google platform for the calendar to be able to add a calendar. So, like, I
Mm.
have my business calendar and then I layer on my personal calendar. So I
Yes.
don't schedule,
Yes.
but it doesn't block my calendar for scheduling things I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. There's no
And
conflicts or less likeliness
yes,
of conflicts.
yes. And the first step for me, just looking at the holidays, is I have 0 meetings from, I think, the 21st
Yes.
through January 5th or something.
Yeah.
Like, I now, will I have meetings? Sure. If I have a consultation for a new client, I'm gonna put it on my calendar. But in specific, I want 0, like, sessions, 0
Yeah.
meetings, and then I can choose what I'm gonna do. I will probably work during some of that time.
Right.
Not working on Christmas, not working on Christmas Eve, all the things, but I also am running a business, and so I will need to do client work. I will need to touch base with my team, but I have it blocked, and can I just tell you that I've been in business for myself since 2009? This is the first year I've done that. This is the first year I've done that because I was so panicked of blocking my calendar that I was like, "Oh, I can't do that. What if a new client wants to work with me?" All the things I know you're probably hearing, things that are popping up in your head, it's really helpful to block your calendar. And then because we're the owner of our company, we can choose to put a meeting on there if we want.
Right.
But I don't want to automatically people scheduling meetings. Does that make sense? Like, no podcast recordings during that time. That is what I'm doing this year.
I love it, Jen. Yeah, no, I love it. I'm doing the same thing. I also sent an email to all our, like, agency clients and let them know,
Oof.
like, virtual offices are officially closed from, yeah, the 23rd, which is the Monday, to January 3rd, which is the following whatever. It's like 2 weeks. And I let them know, "Hey," and I use ChatGPT. "Hey, obviously all your maintenance tasks and everything are ongoing, but, we're not gonna be available unless there's an emergency and, like, whatever. This is what you do if you need
Yes.
to email us, because there's no emergencies in what we do. Unless you're like a firefighter or a ER person, there are no
No.
emergencies. Like, we work on online stuff. Your site can be down, but we'll have a protocol for that, and we'll help you." But I do the same thing for my weekly calendar too. So what I've been experimenting with is I actually use, like, a spreadsheet, and I map out my ideal week. The thing is, for me right now, it just changes so much, but I still create, like, this dream week of, like, how much time do I actually need that doesn't have any calls to do the actual client work that I need to be doing. That needs to be blocked off, right? So that people can't schedule time in there. Now, obviously, like you said, if I need to sneak in a meeting during that time, I will. That's the beauty of things. I can also cancel meetings. But I've been trying to keep certain things, like, sacred. Like, if I work on the weekends, I try really hard for that to be creative planning time, which I love to do, or like CEO days I've heard some people talk about, right? And then, yeah, I try and just be respectful of, like, my routines at home. Try to think about, okay, I put my daughter down for every single night, like every single night. I When she was taking naps, I did most of the naps. So I feel like I was able to work around my schedule, and maybe, at that period, now she's a little older, like, maybe I did take less calls, but I was okay with that at that time. So you can really customize things, and you can trust that your business will keep going, and, people just find the next available time and it'll be fine. And I think I agree with, like, that fear that we have of, like, what if they can't,
Yes.
and it's like, well, what if it's actually it looks very attractive that you've got like 2 availabilities in the next 2 weeks, and, like, you're just a busy person and you're prioritizing other things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will also say too that I use December as
Mm.
my planning. So, like, I have less I mean, I still create content because that's my marketing I have to do every week,
Yeah,
and I still have client work, but beyond that, the focus for me in December is always making my back end systems easier
yeah,
so that it's more automated so that my hand is not in it.
yeah,
And that takes time tech wise to set things up with your CRM and to do like whatever your client sort of process is
right,
going through. And so December is the big month for me to update any of that
right,
stuff that I haven't. So some of the things that I need to do with my CRM, I have to learn how to do it first and then I can implement it. And so all of that is really done in December. So the time that I do work is that, and also I agree, if I work on the weekends, it's whatever I wanna work on.
yes,
Like, I don't have time scheduled for specific client work. That all happens during the week, and the weekends are, I feel like making pins for my Pinterest account, or I feel like,
yeah,
getting ahead and writing 4 different content pieces for my YouTube video podcast and my blog
yeah,
so that I'm ahead of the game starting in January. And it's also the time that I look at all of my analytics
mm,
and find out what I've been doing, how, like, measuring my results, if you will,
yeah,
and planning for 2025.
yes,
A lot of people do that in October and November. I personally like to do it in December when my brain is not so
yeah.
overwhelmed. And it's a happier time of year, I think. Mentally. And so I do a lot of that where I try to plan out whatever sort of launches or releases or things that I'm going to do throughout the year. I try to identify the months that I'm going to do that and prepare that way. But my planning for the year is not besides the launches throughout the year, I focus on quarter by quarter. So I'll do my first quarter planning. Like, what are my topics going to be for my content? What are my, so everything kind of flows, but I have the opportunity to switch things up by
Yes,
not planning fully for the year, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I think the key here is to remember, like, taking this time off, it's gonna make you more productive. Same thing if you, like, I used to do this, I don't do this now because things are a little different, but I used to take a quarter, like, once a quarter, I would book out 2 weeks, and I would just no calls, and so that could have been, like, either time I take off, if I can, or just creative time to plan. So that's one
Yeah, that's a,
strategy.
like for the holidays, you do that like once a quarter
Once a
as well.
quarter, like, I just would book it ahead,
Smart.
like, for 2025, I'd go ahead and, like, book 2 weeks off whenever, and then the cool thing is, like, you don't have calls that week, so you could be like, "Do I can I" because maybe it's a slow period, so you're like, "Oh, maybe I'll just take a little trip," or maybe, you're like, "No, I need to, like, plan this launch," or, because people will book out your calendar, and even if you're starting out too, I recommend you start to get in the habit of that because you'll just just it's just symbolic to be able to be like, okay, these 2 weeks are like this space that I can use however I want. And if I need that break to not burn out, I can use that too, because that is very productive, right? We need to think long term, how you're sustaining this business. The other thing I've heard that I haven't implemented, but I wanted to throw out there is, have you heard this like miracle of the fifth week?
No.
So, you know how some months
I
have
mean, I think a fifth week is a miracle, but I haven't heard the concept you're talking about, and I'm eager to hear.
So I maybe I'll try this for 2025. I'll keep everybody posted, but I still don't know how to exactly do this. I'll be honest. But what okay, you know how some months have 5 weeks, right? So I've heard some people will book out the 5th week, like, they'll just make sure there's nothing in there, and then so you don't have any calls. So that 5th week, again, is the same concept. You can, like, use it to just catch up, or you could use it to take time off. I guess it just depends what your kind of business is too, because, like, we're an agency, so we don't have tons and tons of calls with our clients, but maybe if you're a coach, that would make really great. Like, that would make a lot of sense. Anyway, they're all cool concepts to think about. How can we bake it in, right? Instead of waiting, how can you bake it in so that, you're giving yourself that breathing space, that, like, creative mental space to just be.
Yeah. And you'll know if this is a solution for you because if you have like a bunch of meetings or one big meeting that suddenly cancels on your calendar and you feel relief, that's your sign to start considering this. And the 5-week miracle is awesome because it's only I think 3, maybe 4 times a year. So if you
Yeah,
can't do quarter by quarter, like if that feels too
I
much
like
for
it.
you,
Yeah.
maybe try that. That's kind of a good idea. I have been writing things down on my phone, so
I will
I
keep
will
you
be
posted.
actually
I wanna, like, find out more how to do that because I'm a little freaked out of, like, "Well, what do you mean I get, like, a week off?" Like
but it's only like 3 times a
Right.
year-ish.
Right, right,
So
right.
it's totally doable, and actually you and I can be accountability partners on it if you
We're
want.
gonna have an episode on how we implemented the 5-week miracle, and we'll keep you guys posted. But yeah,
Yeah.
I would say, like, definitely go ahead and book out things in your calendar, whether you're
Like vacations. If you know vacations for the year, book them out
book them
before
out.
you do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I think those are also the things to look forward to. Like, we have another episode on how to fill your creative cup. Like, we know that vacation time actually can stimulate a lot of ideas, and you're, like, left with all that when you go to work. And I think it's great that, like, I love my business. Sometimes it feels like work, sometimes it doesn't. But, like, I'm just filled up by my business, but we also have to just take time off to be able to come in with fresh eyes, fresh brain. I don't know. I just think it stimulates everything in a positive way.
I have another tip too in terms of and I implemented it this year and it was super effective for me. So I have my podcast like you have your
Mhm,
podcast and then now we have this
mhm.
podcast, but for my one podcast, it people could schedule any day that I was open.
Mm.
And someone said, "Why don't you do them like all in one day?" And I'm like, "Ooh, that would be exhausting." But let me tell you, because will try to put some makeup on,
Mhm.
try to look kinda semi-decent, and to do that multiple times during the week is exhausting. I
Mm.
love having Thursdays are the days, and I thought that I wouldn't have any guests
Right.
that would, like, fit in a third. No, no worries. And now, because I started booking them out and I had one day I had 5 podcast interviews in a
Yeah.
row, that's too much,
Right.
right? So now I put a limit that I can only do up to 3.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really helpful, and I know all of the things that you're gonna think or say or
Mhm.
feel, but I really believe that part of being an entrepreneur and kind of the glorious
Mhm.
part is that we get to test things. We
Yeah.
get to try things. We can have a service, have it not work out and never talk about it again.
Right.
Or we can, like it's our
Yeah.
business. So like let's say you try to implement a few of these things
Mhm.
that you think may work for you and they don't.
Mhm.
But if you analyze it, they do, but maybe with a different tweak
Yeah.
or a different twist.
Yeah.
Do it. Like
Yeah.
don't do everything someone tells you
Right.
to do, and don't do nothing that
Right,
people
right.
tell you to
2
do in
extremes.
terms of marketing education. Dip your toe in and
Yeah.
see how it works.
Yeah.
But take a vacation, like, take time
Mhm.
off because the burnout is scary.
Mhm.
So many people are ending their businesses because it's just too much, when I feel like if they had just maybe adjusted things, it might be
Mhm.
okay. So, I guess our advice today is to make sure that you really are thoughtful about what you're doing and how you're doing it and try new things, but take time. Take time or that balance will be very imbalanced and you will be a very sad person.
Yeah. And I have 2 last things I wanna say. If you're on a low
Yeah.
budget and you're like, "Take a vacation," I can't. I just had one of my best friend actually. She loves video games, and she took a week off to play video games, and that was her she took time off work. And it was funny because she kept telling me, "Don't tell my mother because my mother wants me to go visit her, but I want my vacation time to just be this." And I was like, "That's awesome." So, anyway, if you're not into video games, you don't need to do that, but just take a week off to be in your house. If you don't like your house, like, go walk around your neighborhood. I don't know. You don't need to spend a lot of money to take time off. We're talking about spending that time with yourself if you're alone or with a family or whatever you love to do. Like, if you don't know what you love to do, that's also a bad sign outside your business, right? Like, we're all
That's a sign.
we're all obsessed with our business. Jen loves to read. Like,
I
I don't know, I love a lot of things, but, like, I love spending time with my daughter. I love walking, I like going to the gym.
I took, I guess it was like 3 weeks ago now, I had a couple appointments that needed to reschedule, and I was with nothing on that day, and I just sat and read the whole
Oh my
day. I got
god.
so many ideas for my
Oh
business
my
during
god.
that time, like, it was the best. I feel like I wanna build in a day each month to do that.
Oh my god.
So that's another tip, right?
I
If
love
you
that.
really love something, build in time. If you love getting massages, as a business owner, that's gonna actually help your business. Schedule one once a month and
Mhm.
have your business pay for
Oh
it.
my
It's your
god. That's so
bonus.
good. Yeah, this is my bonus. Yeah. Oh my god, I love that idea of, like, a whole day to read. I would
Can
love
you
that.
imagine? Can
Mm.
you even imagine? I couldn't do it with younger kids at home, like, good luck, but it was even still, if they're playing with their
Yeah,
toys and you're reading or listening to a book or
yeah.
however you wanna do it, like,
There's options.
I feel like we live to work, and we need to flip the script
Mhm.
and work to live.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. The business is gonna be there, like, whether you're working on it a little bit at a time, it's just gonna keep going, it's gonna grow at the pace it's meant to grow, and we've got other parts of our life, and again, that's I think also as a marketing strategy, when people see in your stories or wherever you share, when they see you have a life, that's attractive, like, no one wants to I don't know, I don't think the workaholic thing, I think it only looks attractive on Suits. Like, that's the only place where you're like, "These lawyers do not have any time off," but they kind of have
And they were miserable.
a life.
They were not happy, okay?
But everywhere else, like, people wanna see your kids, they wanna see that you cook meals, that you do birthday parties, that you travel. All Whenever I travel and I post,
Like,
you
you're
get
a real person.
Yes, and it's very
Yes,
attractive, right? Then the other thing I just wanna quickly put is, having a tool like Calendly or any calendar tool is gonna help you implement all our ideas, like the idea that Jen had with the podcast. On Calendly, it's so easy, right? So I don't have any, like, affiliation with Calendly or
and
anything.
free, and free.
Yes, yeah, so I used to use my Dubsado tool, but it was just I was miserable because I was just using it because I have everything else, and I was like, "I just need to pay for this tool," and it's great. So you need to find your combo, but take the time to set it up, and like Jen said, experiment. Experiment with one calendar. It doesn't work, update it. Like, it's not gonna stay your schedule's gonna change, so you get to make it, change and work for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, and this is your company. This is your
Yeah.
job. Let's make it as happy as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if you listen to the last podcast about creativity, taking time off, doing something like reading all day
Oh my
is
god,
actually good
I'm
for
gonna
your
book my
business.
reading day right now in December. Maybe I'll, like, ease into it with my weeks off in December, I'll do a reading day, although that's gonna be hard because we have family around. It's like
Even a couple hours, like, you can't do a day, even a couple hours will help.
I'll just tell
Uh,
people I have a bunch of meetings that day, and I'll, like, go to a coffee shop and just read the full day there.
there you go. Gotta do what you gotta do. If you found some help with this podcast or YouTube video, please, please, please subscribe. Let us know, comment, go to our Instagram, do all the things because we definitely want to know that this is something you want to hear more of, or we'll stop. I mean, if nobody wants to hear, which I doubt, but
No.
if nobody wants to hear, we'll stop. So definitely go do that. Thanks so much.